today we will mainly focus on three trends. Sophisticated simplicity. It is really about that whole emphasis on ingredients. I think in this inflation, I think consumers are really looking for value behind what they purchase. And that has really translated to a lot more towards evidence or proof behind what they are buying. And that also translates to beauty or skincare in general. Neuroglow, I think earlier the speaker before me talked a lot about psycare. I think that has a lot of relevance. It's really about that whole mind-body connection. Wellness, of course, it's a big thing, moving towards skin health, and how that has actually evolved in beauty. And of course, last trend, build AI. I think AI, last year it was the metaverse. This year it was AI. I think we have clients asking us in terms of AI, what can they do, what they should do, and we're going to share some examples in terms of what we are seeing in the beauty industry in terms of AI, and of course, possible challenges and roadblocks along the way as well. With that, let's start with sophisticated simplicity. So we are grounded in data. We do our own research, like we have what we call the G36 data, where we pull over 1,000 consumers, asking them beauty-related questions. And in regards to sophisticated simplicity earlier, I talked about consumers actually seeking justified value in their purchases. And you can see, I think, from 54% of US consumers who research ingredients to better understand product effectiveness, I think it shows a desire for consumers wanting to know more, and brands should actually provide for that. I think when we're coming to like what's now, I think one of the biggest example that we are seeing, it's for brands to be really honest, to earn trust, and to provide clear information, and also to deliver the truth in that aspect. I think over here we show two examples. One is that of Skin School. I like to think of Skin School a bit like the Sky Scanner of the beauty industry. So you can think of a very expensive product, say you have a La Mer cream. What Skin School does is it basically looks at the ingredients and find you a cheaper alternative of that. And that's really popular among Gen Zs, where they are a bit more positive and inclined towards dupes, where they are fine with it as long as cost is a driving factor. And Fix is a haircare brand. Fix really, it's a formula-based haircare brand that really prides itself in its haircare formula, but it's also really honest, where it tells you that it's not going to really solve anti-hair loss with just topicals, and that's how brands should really communicate in that sense. I think brands that also highlight product efficacy will stand out more, aligning with multifunctional, less with better concepts. I think on the left, we show this example of Serena Williams, where we sort of see the blurring of the healthcare and the skincare space. So I think this product, it's a pain relief product, but also more than a pain relief product for sports. What it also do is it tries to claim into that whole wellness space, talking about like relaxation, centered, and that's a bit blurring into that space. In terms of efficacy, I think one might necessarily talk into personalization. And this brand in the middle, Hilo, actually talks it with 3 different active ingredients. So the consumer is able to choose 3 ingredients from 6 different options and mix it into 15 different possible combinations. And I think I want brands to also be a bit more aware on the activation of it. So I think that whole process of the consumer actually breaking open that serum, pouring it in itself, it's like a signal to activate the product. And that is also translating to what efficacy could potentially be. And of course, I think effective doesn't mean complicated. I think we have been harping on this whole hero ingredient story for years. I have always been asked by my clients, I think over here we see this brand Skintific. It's a popular Indonesian brand. it's a really interesting brand because it is popular in the Southeast Asia region. It is claimed as a Norwegian brand, but actually, if you do enough research, you would realize that it is Chinese owned. Actually, this is also how Chinese companies are moving into the Southeast Asia space. And I'm keeping my mouth shut on that, but yeah, I mean, that's an example that you can think of in that sense. But one other question I often get is, Kinshen, what is the next trending skincare ingredient and what are we looking at next? And sometimes I just want to say that, what is trending might not necessarily be new. It could be also ways to think of how to look at old ingredients and how to make them new again. I mean, I'm from P&G, and we know that we were the first to discover niacinamide. So niacinamide was discovered since 1998, and GMPD, which is from Mintel, also showed niacinamide from 1998. And new product development has since grown triple folds on it. But what is one way to really look at niacinamide and make it new again? So Olay recently launched this Olay Super Serum, where they actually put niacinamide in a low pH buffer. So typically, the buffer system is to keep the stability of the product. And by putting it in a low pH buffer system, you are able to activate the niacinamide, reduce the skin chaosity. And that's how Olay actually claims, that's how you talk about the new niacinamide in that aspect. What's coming next? Science-backed ingredients will definitely be the focal point. I think we are seeing a lot more towards molecular weight, brands claiming Daltons. So talking about small molecular weights penetrating more into the skin. We are also talking a lot more towards product activation. In this caviar example, you see that the red suspended bubbles would actually break apart when pressed. And that's also another example of how brands talk about product activation and linking it with product efficacy in that sense. Coming to the future, I think, what are we looking at? I often get the question that, oh, Kinshen, you are not talking about sustainability. It's sustainability not important again. In fact, we did not overtly call out sustainability this year, not because it is not important, but I think sustainability has become somewhat of, you need to have it, but you don't have to overtly call it out. And I think brands need to realize that sustainability is not a checkbox to just tick off the barometer in that sense. I think I often like this quote from John Mueller, the current CEO of P&G. He often say, we cannot compromise consumer delight for sustainability. If we don't deliver consumer delight on a less sustainable alternative, then we will achieve nothing. And it makes a lot of sense. I think generally consumers want to do good, and brands should enable that. I think there's a drive towards that whole green chemistry, biotechnology, and that's where we are seeing in that example. One example, it's actually this brand, Givaudan. I think it launches Reti Life recently. I think if we look into how this could actually happen, I think when we look into retinol, I mean, everyone knows that retinol is a very powerful anti-aging ingredient. But of course, it has its own downsides. There's irritation, concerns, and of course, such lab-grown ingredients, it is known to be claimed less irritating. So of course, I think time needs to be told to be seen. And of course, I think recently we also see news that L'Oreal, Kao, and Unilever have actually joined ventures into this Geno. So Geno is like a biotechnology firm where it looks into lab-grown ingredients, producing ingredients of the future with molecules. And this perhaps I feel would be the biggest shift in the industry, where your next future ingredient might not just be a niacinamide or retinol, but it could be maybe, say, melacezin. So melacezin is actually made from, say, the furfur plant, the furfur molecule. It is known to actually inhibit tyrosinase activity, so giving you like brightening benefits in that sense. All right, moving on to our next trend, neuroglow. So this really talks about the whole mind-body connection. I think there's a lot of relevance to what the earlier speaker spoke about psych-care. I think that has been a very relevant theme, especially in beauty and skincare. I think you would see me talking a lot about ingestibles, wellness in this space. I think I often get the question also, it's like, Kinshen, ingestible, it's not really new in skincare. Are we sure this is a new thing? And the fact is, you are correct. I think ingestible is not new. Maybe say 5-7 years ago, we see some collagen drinks, particularly in the APAC EMEA region. But I would also argue and counter back that 5 to 7 years ago, there wasn't that whole skin health space. I think primarily at that time, skincare was very much dominated into anti-aging, hydration, and whitening. But I think what we are seeing now, it's really COVID has really accelerated consumers' want to look after their health, and we are seeing that even in skincare options as well. So I think from 71% of Spanish consumers who say that beauty brands should actually provide more evidence to Indonesian adults who say that, looking good makes them feel more confident. I think consumers do want to feel good, and brands should be able to empower them in that aspect. And what's happening now? Beauty sleep is not a myth. I'm sorry to bore you with this chart, but this is actually 2 studies. On the right is actually a study done by LVMH. So it's really looking at how sleep deprivation causes impairment on your skin. So it basically saw that your TOO increase. So TOO, it's actually your transepidermal water loss. So I'm a bit more technical on this because I used to do this, but transepidermal water loss is basically the rate of evaporation of moisture from your skin. And it's also sort of an indicator in terms of how it's actually a parameter of how it actually measures your barrier integrity. So the higher the TOO, the worse your skincare integrity. On the left, it's actually a study done by P&G, also published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine, where they looked at after sleep deprivation, facial skin yellowness actually increased significantly. And funnily enough, this study was actually my last study that I conducted before I left P&G. So I was very happy that it was actually able to publish to the journal. And I think we are really seeing a lot more pockets of evidence in terms of how companies or beauty companies are starting to look at stresses and its relation to this sort of skin connection. So like, I think we all know that, if I don't have a good night of sleep, my skin tends to not feel good. But we somehow are not able to pinpoint why and what is causing it. But I think as brands start to look into this space more, I think this is an area that would definitely be interesting to even further probe it. What else? I think this whole concept of overall well-being from inside out. I think earlier I talked about post-pandemic. Consumers really see that whole prioritization for health. And one such good example is actually Shiseido. I mean, I would like to call out in particular because I think I started, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the IFSCC conference. So it's the cosmetic conference for international cosmetic chemists. So it's held every 2 years somewhere around the world. I started attending, I think, since 2018 or 19. And since then, Shiseido has been really looking at vascular research. Initially in 2019, when I first saw Shiseido talking about vascular research, I knew they were going to do something about this whole, blood and relationship, but I really couldn't point something specific. But I think as time progresses, it starts to appear a little clearer. So I think in 2019, they first started with a publication in the middle where it won the Best Research Award, where they tried to link skin vascularity with elasticity. So they look at vasculature of skin in young women versus older women, and they were able to really see that in younger women, the blood vessels were compressed, tightly packed together, and this supported your collagen or your ECM, your extracellular metrics, versus in more aged or experienced women, the vascularity are a bit more sparse and spread upon. And then I think the following year, or rather last year, we saw that Shiseido actually launched the probiotic powder for autoimmune. And autoimmune, if you know, Shiseido autoimmune is one of their hero products that talk a lot about skin immunity. And this probiotic really targets that whole gut health, immunity. And just, I think, a couple months ago, Shiseido actually launched this partnership with Kagome. So Kagome, it's a leading fruit juice company. And Zimera, I think it's like you can think of it like a herbal health company. So I think in terms of like, you have your traditional Chinese medicine, and then you also have like your traditional Japanese medicine. So I think it's a very interesting concept in terms of how Shiseido is really approaching beauty from that inside-out wellness concept in this aspect. Early indicators tapping into that whole mind-body. We are also seeing Amore Pacific. So they launched this GABA 365 with L-glutamic acid. So GABA, it's a neurotransmitter. I think whenever we talk about sleep or relaxation, a lot of the times it has always been linked with like fragrance to help you to relax better, but it hasn't really been looked at from an ingestible or ingredient point of view to really prove whether can this be done. But this L-glutamic acid has actually been awarded Korean FDA, so the Korean Food Safety Approval, to be able to make such a claim. Of course, I think we also see the Peace and Pure Facial Serum, which actually claim to block cortisol, which is like your stress hormones. So I think these are really just some examples in terms of what brands are doing in that space. I think looking ahead, that whole mind-skin connection, I think with Aroma Associates, looking at the whole negative impact that personal or environmental stresses that has on skin, or really looking at chrysanthemum to address like the body's stress response and damage to like increased cortisol in that aspect. Looking ahead into the future, I think as much as I think, this whole concept of looking into your brain and trying to talk about neurocosmetics, psychodermatology is a very sexy space to be in. I think brands also need to be aware of the limitations that it has. I think right now, one of the biggest challenge that we see is, while it is easy for brands to say, I can detect a signal if I let her apply a skincare versus say no skincare, so like baseline versus skincare. But if we were to look into product comparison, say product A versus product B, I think from a technology point of view, we are still not there yet. I think the dynamic range of technology is not able to support the sensitivity of such a challenge. And I definitely think that that's an opportunity for brands to really work with vendors to really challenge upon this space if we really want to push ahead with neurocosmetics and psychodermatology in that aspect. And coming to the third and the last trend, Build AI. Of course, artificial intelligence will transform the beauty industry, making it more personalized, efficient, and effective. But how? So when looking at consumers' data, and from Mintel's GNPD data, we can see that 40% of finished adults are optimistic about AI, or actually 62% of US consumers are interested in hyper-personalized beauty and personal care products. So there's really that opportunity for AI to transform this industry and make our work a bit smarter in that sense. What are we seeing? So on the left, this is something by L'Oreal, the Keratis K scan. So you can think of it like a dermoscope hair scan. So it actually has 3 different lighting modes. It's being trained by over tens of thousands of images using large language machine learning models. And on the right, it's basically an AI algorithm to really look at an app to detect skin cancer. So think of like you have different spots on your skin and you are a bit worried like what it might be. Could it be melasma? Could it be something benign, or is it something that I should be worried? Now you can take an image, send it to a dermatology through a large language machine learning model. They are able to scan through over 3 million images and give you an early assessment on whether you will need follow-up or not in that sense. And when it comes to skincare or beauty, what does it entail in that sense? I think it definitely entails a lot of ideation. I mean, when I think back to my days in R&D or in marketing when I was working, we often had all these ideation sessions where we need to think about, say, give me what does radiance means, or what is the next definition of what whitening could mean, or brightening could mean in that sense. And I think putting it into a AI platform, getting inspiration would always be one low-hanging fruit that brands can do in that sense. Of course, there could also be looking at what's the next ingredient. So this is actually Revela Skin Fibro Queen. It's actually a molecule that is discovered by the brand's AI engine. So it basically sifts through millions of molecules and base it off. It gives you one sort of compatible molecule that works in that sense and recommends it to you. And that is also one potential example of how you could actually use AI in that sense. And I often like to also play around with AI. Last week I was watching a conference by IFSCC, and I thought that was particularly smart. So in this, using ChatGPT as an example, everyone can be a formulator, right? So I just give an example. Give me a formula for a shampoo. And it basically outputs the answer: soap, water, jojoba oil, vinegar. Of course, you can have it, but it probably isn't the kind of shampoo that you would probably want to use from a formulator perspective. But what if you give it a smarter prompt? I am a cosmetic chemist. Please give me a shampoo formula in terms of percentage and be as precise as possible. And of course, here you would see you have your sodium lauryl sulfate, you have your pentanol hydrating agent, and all in different degrees of percentage. And of course, I think there are still more work to be done, but you get the gist of what you can do with AI in terms of possibilities. That being said, I think one also has to recognize the privacy concerns that come with AI and such large language models. I think when it comes with images, we saw Estee Lauder having a data breach last year. And I think with a lot of images, privacy concerns, brands need to also address how they are going to protect such information and how such information will not be lost in the hands of hackers and things like that. Looking into the future, I think I'm often asked, like, what am I most excited about AI? And the other question I'm also often asked is, you talked about AI, but what about the metaverse? I mean, is the metaverse dead? What is my opinion on it? I often feel the metaverse, it's still in trial. I'm still quietly optimistic about it, because why I see this is I often think that the beauty experience, especially in luxury beauty, can often be enhanced. I mean, if we think about that whole beauty experience, it's often about a consumer going into a counter, purchasing a skincare or beauty product, she talks to the BC, and that's it. There isn't any other communication, follow-up, or any sort of interaction in that sense. But that is where I think brands can really tap onto the metaverse to really sort of engage consumers in that sense, or even use AI to leverage imaging diagnostics. I think we are all not familiar with what we see at counter diagnostics. I think when we go into a high-end shop, we expect to go through some sort of skin analysis. You would sit in front of an imaging booth, they take a picture of you and output you some results. But the question for you brands is, we often talk that skin is dynamic, skin is living. I mean, there are more than things that impact the skin, right? It's not just your color. You have things like your blood flow, your circadian rhythm. But why, when we look at skin in itself, we look at it in a single frame, a 2D image? Why don't we take like a 5-second video? Of course, I think there's that challenge of motion artifacts, how still you can be in terms of that. But I believe that would be the future of imaging and diagnostics in terms of giving us dynamic images, giving us more time frames so that we can actually do more kinds of analysis like time series and things like that. So this is just a peek into the future and what we would see. So recapping what I talked earlier in terms of the future, I think, of course, sophisticated simplicity. Brands would definitely focus on ingredients. I think it's very much looking at hero ingredients, multifunctional products. I think in terms of NeuroGlow, that whole concept of that mind-body connection, looking at sleep, looking at various different stresses that are within that skin health realm, and things like blood vascularity would be of an interesting approach. And of course, in terms of AI, looking at how technology challenges and improves the beauty industry would be of something to look at. With that, I've come to the end of today's presentation. I thank you for your time, and I shall now open up the floor for questions, comments. Thank you so much.
What is the role of Ayurveda for the future?
I think that's a lovely question. I think Ayurveda fits perfectly into the NeuroGlow space, I think, if you were to say. So I think we know, I think if you look into Ayurveda, your licorice root, or even ashwagandha. So I think these are really popular Ayurvedic ingredients. But I think how I would actually further drive Ayurveda is if I can combine, say, the NeuroGlow aspect of it with the sophisticated simplicity. So what if I can do some in vivo trial, prove that ashwagandha, maybe in a 28-day study, indeed provides some anti-inflammation, or reduce my skin barrier, or maybe make my skin lighter. I think that actually drives consumer believability, and it also helps to convince consumers on why I should invest in that ingredient. So yeah, thank you.
What I understood is when it comes to beauty and skincare brands, AI is definitely going to have its effect, especially for products that you can try on yourself, or sending maybe your skin problems, as you mentioned. But what do you think when it comes to fragrance brands, when it comes to experience? Is there any possibility of AI integration?
I think that's a good question. One sort of immediate example I can think of is that of an eNose. I'm not sure if you have heard of that example of an eNose. So I understood that I can get back to you on the exact brand. But I know how it works. So an eNose is basically, I think, it's a collection of different fragrances, and based on how you actually describe the fragrance type, so be it like velvety, you want it to be dark, amber, whatever, it basically processes it through its AI machine learning model, and it's able to output you different molecules that you can use for your formulation in that aspect. So for now, I can think of it as being a very efficient library I do think that from a fragrance point of view, we can use it more as a diagnostic tool. But whether that is, I mean, my sort of underlying concern is just whether what the AI tool recommends, it's actually what perhaps the perfumer would also give, because I think perfumery, as much as you want to think of it as science, there is a certain component of art. And I think I'm just curious whether is AI able to integrate that into its learning model in that sense. But definitely, I think for the library, I think that's a low-hanging fruit that would be possible. And yeah, I can perhaps go back and find the brand and I can share it with you. So yeah.
I just have a question regarding skincare products for men. All I've been hearing about throughout the entire exhibition is about women's skincare and all of that, but where do men actually fit in the future of like skincare products?
Great question. I think to first answer this question, I always like to start with the consumer. So how, maybe a bit of insight. I have been a skincare chemist for 8 years. I mean, now coming to 10 years. And truth be told, I don't put anything on my skin. I know that UV damage is terrible. I should be using sunblock. And my girlfriend nags at me a lot on this, but I still somehow find that process to be troublesome, bothersome, and I just cannot, yeah. And I think it's a very true consumer habit. And I think that until brands start to maybe, I mean, I might not form the representative population, but I would fairly say that it is quite a big population. I wouldn't be very surprised who are like me. And in that sense, I would think of like brands to see how we can change this consumer habits. I mean, is it maybe through shaving products as a lower hanging fruit? I think we have seen Gillette actually coming up with also skincare related products. So into your shaving routines, you make it an easy step for them to apply on some serum and cream. That is one activation model. But I often like to start with the consumer in that aspect. And as to why we show the examples of women, of course, I think generally it often relates to the size of price. I think men's skincare, it's a niche. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a niche, but slightly a niche market. It's growing. But of course, compared to the general women's skincare, there is still some space to grow. But there's, of course, a space worth to be looked at in that sense. Yeah, thank you.
The new technology, GABA 365, is very good, and now it becomes cheaper and cheaper. But before, in the market, there's some traditional method, for example, the sandalwood oil to help sleep, but the price is still high. So do you think in future, with the technology, more new technology and more cheaper, so all the method can't compete with new technology?
If I understood your question correctly, you're trying to understand GABA 365 price versus TCM's price.
Yeah, the new technology is good, and the price can become cheaper and cheaper. But the old method, for example, the sandalwood oil, from India, they can help you to sleep better, but the price still high. They can't decrease price. So
I think with GABA 365, one of the reasons why it's working well, more than skill, it's also, I think, the recognition from the Korean FDA. So Korean FDA, it's like 食管局 for like Korea. And I think like that sort of adds to that whole accreditation and visibility behind that ingredient. Like this is safe to use. But I think with regards to say, I mean, I'm just using this as an example, but sandalwood, like, I mean, we know that sandalwood, perhaps the aroma of sandalwood can help us to sleep, but whether there are enough studies behind to support this case, I think it is still a question. And if you are a brand working on sandalwood, I would definitely encourage you to work more towards the accreditation part. I do not believe that one ingredient it's more superior than the other in that aspect. But I think it's more towards, I mean, I'm sorry to say about marketing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to have a little bit more insight of what you think about cruelty-free products, because I feel like it's such a complicated space, especially with big known brands
Yeah.
that are still struggling to make the entire shift with testing on animals.
Lovely question, and thank you for bringing it up. I think she's asking on what's the opinion on cruelty-free product and that whole sustainability in general. I was having this client presentation maybe 2 weeks ago. It was to a big client, one of the top FMCG companies. I was asked the question, you keep saying, consumers want sustainability, but when consumers go to the shelf, they pick the cheaper option still. So what is the problem? And my challenge to that particular client, I said it was, being a consumer myself, if I were to ask you, what is the difference between, say, clean, cruelty-free, organic, natural, forest stewardship product, and you have all this range of different acronyms, symbols that, if I were to put it simply, it really means nothing. Like, if I'm a consumer, all I care about is, why should I pay more for your product? And I think we are also coming to a consensus, because I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the Eco Beauty Score Consortium. So the Eco Beauty Score Consortium was launched maybe, I think, 2 years ago with 16 of the leading beauty companies. I think the last I checked, it has risen to 70 companies. But what the Eco Beauty Score Consortium actually aims to do is it aims to give you a generic score of a product. So from a sustainability angle. So looking at the manufacturing, looking at the ingredients, the end-to-end production, the packaging, how sustainable is it? And it gives you in terms of what is that judging metric. So if, let's say, today you purchase a product which is $100 with a Eco Beauty score of, say, 90, versus you purchase a product that is $50, but Eco Beauty score of only 50, then you know that is the opportunity cost that you are paying the upgrade for. And I think as consumers, this is a very direct and easy way to understand. My understanding is right now the first prototype has been released. I think they are testing it out, and I think it's a right direction in terms of where beauty companies are looking at as a single centralized scoring, instead of all the different cruelty-free, natural, clean, organic. I think that's too confusing, in my personal opinion.
My question is, where would you place Africa on the map in regards to Beautyworld? And secondly, out of the companies in this expo, only few of them have really penetrated in Africa. So what's your take on that? And thirdly, I'd like to add on to her and the developments that have been made. I saw you mentioned about Keratse and that they've integrated different skincare types. Are these skincare types only in Europe and America, or are samples also taken from different parts on the different African countries? Thank you.
I think that's a lovely question, and I think it boils down to the overall theme on diversity and inclusion in beauty. I think you made a point on African skin and products for African skin. I think there's definitely a market for it, but I think it also boils back as companies, as brands, to that one singular question on size of price. I wouldn't say that maybe, I mean, this is my hypothesis. I might be wrong, but maybe the price for innovation does not commensurate in investing in that. I mean, if you are feeling like there are not enough African targeting products, but one thing I would do say is I think we do see big companies taking that step to look at, I think there was a study done, I cannot remember, it was L'Oreal or P&G, looking at African American skin. So I think looking at understanding skin biology, I think given a higher melanin content, this actually affects a lot more towards like skin elastin. So because there's more elastin in the skin, it ages slowly. So what sort of products would then actually be more suitable in that sense? But has that reached the market, or do we see anything? To be honest, I cannot give you an answer yet. I can actually find out. I think that's a good question. I would definitely search for some products, and I think we can connect to you. But off my head, unfortunately, I can't think of any. So, but I think that's definitely a space with the overarching diversity and inclusion that beauty brands are also looking at.
All right. I recently attended an AI conference in Washington, D.C. And my question to you is, what kind of AI innovations do you see in the beauty industry? I will give you an example that was presented at the event. Estee Lauder, for example, issued or created a mobile app, which is a voice-enabled makeup assistant. I don't know if you have seen it. It's absolutely amazing. And this app is for blind women who want to do their own makeup by themselves. And Estee Lauder demoed it to us. Absolutely amazing AI innovation. So what other examples do you see or do you know of in the beauty industry?
I think you brought up a great example on inclusion. So I think L'Oreal also has this thing called HAPTA, H-A-P-T-A. So I'm not sure if you know of HAPTA. So I think HAPTA also uses AI-driven technology to help disabled women consumers or disabled consumers to apply makeup on their skin. So it's like a robotic arm sort of sorts. So I think we do see AI being used in that inclusion space. But I think if we were to look at AI in mass, I definitely think that AI in terms of generative AI, in terms of how we ideate, how we formulate, would perhaps be the lowest hanging fruit. Next, I would think that in terms of diagnostics, one sort of, I think earlier I brought the example of video imaging as a diagnostic tool. Even more than video imaging, I often think that right now when we go to counter diagnostics, my skin is always compared to, say, a database of women or men around my age. But if we keep trying to sell the message that you are your best own skin, why are we still comparing against other people's skin when we look at that from a technical model? I think we can use AI to sort of predict what our own skin, what our own best could look like. And I think that is definitely one of the futures that I think we can actually work upon. Yeah, thank you. I think we have another question on the left.
Hi. So my question is, you've shared a lot about insights about skincare. So can you share more about hair care and what the future of hair care products looks like?
Lovely. I think, I mean, yes, I think you asked a very good question on like, why is this presentation so skincare driven? And if we look at the overall beauty category, skincare represents 70% of it. A lot of the leading innovation all stems from skincare. Even if I think you look into that whole skinification of hair, looking at keratin, this sort of things, we saw it in skincare. So I think in that, I mean, one sort of low-hanging I can think of, I mean, I did not prepare for any hair care materials, but if you were to test me on the spot, I would think that scalp care is definitely one that is, of course, of big interest. I think we do see that scalp care being a very important part of research. Another one interesting thing, it's that whole aging population. So I think while skincare is very much interested in Gen Z and creating for Gen Z, I think we are seeing quite a few brands looking at hair aging, how different women of color actually age and how that actually affects the keratin strength and what sort of products to then suit to that sort of target group. I cannot, off my head, I cannot think of that brand, but I can definitely look it up and send it off to you. So yeah, thank you. Very nice. You have a lot of questions. I like it. With that, I end my session. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.